Welcome back to the Four Baseball Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Heading to the top of the American League East, we are 6 away from being completely through all the team profiles and projections and predictions and everything else in between baseball. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk about the Blue Jays and the Yankees, man. Two teams that should be, fighting for the AL East. This is one of the best divisions of baseball, if not the best division of baseball. Steps, how are you doing?
I'm definitely excited. I think the Blue Jays and the Yankees both did a lot this offseason and both greatly improved their rosters. It's just a matter of keeping everyone out on the field.
I completely agree. The Toronto Blue Jays last year, and kick it off there, 92 and 70. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. said it was going to be the sequel. That was not a sequel. That was like Alvin and the Chipmunks 2. It wasn't that great. The first one was better. It was more exciting at least. Vladdy Jr. had a big regression. Big still being like really good, but like just not MVP caliber. Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi were borderline unpitchable. And those were two big pieces for them. And they never really fired on all cylinders. I think that's an accurate, like I guess, summary of their season. They were still a solid team. 92 wins, nothing to sleep on, but it's just nothing worked perfectly.
Yeah, and this was kind of a team in the preseason I was expecting to be, a 100 win team. This was like an all-star team assembled. You got guys that you thought were going to perform at an elite level, and they really didn't. I mean, even Bo Bichette before that month of September wasn't really looking like Bo Bichette either. So a lot of things went wrong for this team, and I think that's something we could talk about today. And I think next year will be something to look forward to.
I mean, I definitely think top to bottom they kind of fizzled out very, very early on. Vladdy wasn't himself, like Tom said. Bo Bichette wasn't himself. George Springer was how much did he play? He played a lot last season, right? He
I think
wasn't.
he
I
played
don't
like
think he was fully.
150 games.
Yeah, so that was kind of like his most healthy season he's had in a little while. But you did have some positive notes like the emergence of Alejandro Kirk really kind of stepping out onto the scene and being that kind of A-list catcher. And I definitely think this team is primed and ready to go for this upcoming season.
Yeah. So,
Um,
Stas, what happened that offseason?
All right, so they lost guys by the names of Jackie Bradley Jr. He heads the Royals. Ross Stripling, he heads over the Giants. They end up trading Teoscar Hernandez to the Mariners in exchange for Eric Swanson and Adam Mako. And then they traded Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Gabriel Moreno to Arizona for Dalton Varsho. Um, in addition to those acquisitions, they got Kevin Kiermaier on a 1-year deal, Chris Bassett to a 3-year deal. They bought out Bo Bichette's arbitration with a 3-year, $36 million contract, signed Chad Green to a 2-year deal, and then signed Brandon Belt to a 1-year deal. So I definitely think they added in depth, but they did lose a big bat in Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, that it's a pretty big bet, but I think it was a sacrifice that they traded a little bit of offense for some outfield defense, and that's definitely something the Blue Jays needed to do. Um, I feel like Ross Stripling, that loss actually hurts a little bit more than people are going to recognize. He was kind of their most like reliable middle of the rotation pitcher last year. Obviously, they had Manoah and Gossman who led the ship, but Ross Stripling was effectively their three starter last year.
Yeah, I mean they went out and got another three-starter in Chris Bassett, who I think will fill the shoes pretty well. He's not like a superstar guy, but he's a guy that will come at you with, all of his pitches because he has so many of them, and he'll be a guy that fills the shoes. And I think I am looking forward to a breakout from the 4 and 5 starters being Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi.
I honestly think we underrate Chris Bassett. Like, obviously, he's not an ace by any stretch of the imagination, but he just has the ability to go through lineups 2 or 3 times on any given night. He's got so many offerings, as Tom mentioned, and he's been consistently good since 2019. Like they signed him for 3 years, 63 million. It's a good contract, and it really just it reassures a 3 game series. It's not Manoa, Gossman, Stripling, Barrios, Kikuchi. It's Manoa, Gossman, Bassett.
Yeah, and that three-headed monster is definitely a lot more to be scared of. I think last season this was more of a offensive team, ever like the offense with no pitching. But now it seems like they've went out in the offseason and, getting Eric Swanson some more pitching, to kind of change the identity of this team from being an all hitting team to now more of a complete team.
Yeah, I definitely think the depth was their main point. They went out, they got some defense for the outfield. They went out, they got some pitching depth, and that's really all they needed to do. And they kind of nailed the offseason, in my opinion.
I would have liked to see them get another starter, if I'm going to be honest. I don't really trust Jose Barrios or Yusei Kikuchi. Kikuchi's always been like, oh my God, when's it all going to click? But it hasn't yet. And it might do it this year, but you can't just hope it does. There has to be an insurance policy there.
Yeah, and I mean, you said Kikuchi has been having a very good spring training. That's not to say that, he's had a huge sample size, but in 13 innings pitched, he's been pretty effective, 1.38 ERA in 13 innings pitched. I mean, that's something like it's a couple different outings that we're working with here. Not a sample size that I'm, confident to say he's going to have this breakout year, but if you can get one of the two guys to, have a slight bounce back, because Jose Barrios, well, Brad does not like him. I think he has some potential. He needs to work on, I think is it the fastball that gets hit every time?
It's everything at this point, but yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done, but if he can revert back to that Twins form and be, a guy that, doesn't give up so many hits and so many home runs. I mean, I think he led the league in hits given up last year. He's just lost all effectiveness. If he can revert back to that Twins form, that's what a starting pitcher four should look like.
Yeah.
So we kind of have touched on everyone in the rotation, but there's the one guy that's injured, Hyunjin Ryu. He's going to be out for a large portion of the season. He said he's targeting a July return. Hopefully they come back. Do you think his addition to this rotation boosts it at all, or do you guys think it's just kind of he's not going to really be that effective when he comes back?
I think he's better than Kikuchi and Barrios last year, and that's an upgrade if they're the same. So I think it's more dependent on Barrios and Kikuchi than Ryu himself, because we kind of know what we'll get from Hyunjin Ryu.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad to see because Hyunjin Ryu was like, I'm not gonna say like crazy effective, but he was pretty effective in years prior. And the minute he started falling off, you got that support in Kevin Gossman and Alek Manoah having these good seasons. It's what Brad mentioned before. All the cylinders are not firing at the same time. I feel like if you get a healthy Hyunjin Ryu that can pitch half a season, you might have a confident starting rotation. 1 through 5, or maybe even a 6-man rotation, because actually maybe boot out one of the guys if they're not being effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, Ryu's 35 at this point, so he's kind of coming towards the end of his career, I would say. So I don't know. I think he's gonna be definitely a helpful piece when he does come back in July, but I'm just worried about how effective he is going to be.
I think he'll be fine. He's not a flamethrower, so it's not like the velo's going to go anywhere. He was already in the bottom of the league in fastball velocity, and it's just last year he was hurt and it made him ineffective. So maybe that's also what was lingering in 2021, and he can resort to somewhat of what he was in 2019 and 20, but you never know. And then you also forget that they have two aces in Gossman and Manoah. Gossman was one of the unluckiest pitchers in all of baseball last year. I think he had a 363 batting average on balls in play, which is pretty bad. That's obviously shows signs for improvement. And he just seems like a guy, A, there's going to be that improvement. B, no shift, and he actually performed better without a shift. So they're just going to get rid of that. That might help him. So Gossman rebound season.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that happening, especially with a guy like this. I mean, he led the league in FIP, I think, last year, maybe top 3. It was surprising to see. He was kind of a guy that had the below the under the surface stats that kind of wowed you a little bit. I thought it was a little bit of an underwhelming season from him on the surface, but I think obviously he's still got the talent. So I think he could be that 2 guy. He's not going to be the number 1 guy anymore. I think Alek Manoah is taking the spot. He's kind of, showed that dominance last year and even the season before. So I think the top of this rotation is pretty set.
I definitely agree with that. Let's head over to their bullpen though. They got Jordan Romano, Eric Swanson, Yimi Garcia, Anthony Bass, Tim Meza, Adam Simber, Trevor Richard, Mitch White, and then they have an injured Chad Green currently.
It's okay.
How are you feeling, Brad?
It's okay.
It's
I really don't
definitely
like
not
that
the
there's only
worst
one
bullpen.
lefty. I like variety.
That's fair.
And you have variety from the right side. Like the Adam Simber, you get the low slot righty. Jordan Romano, kind of a power pitcher on both sides. He's got decent stuff, but he's also a high exit velocity guy. Eric Swanson, we saw with the Mariners last year, was really effective. Yami Garcia, crafty veteran, can be very good. Obviously, they got Bass at the trade deadline last year for Jordan. What was the shortstop's name? There's Jordan Groshans.
Yeah.
And he was solid for them. He wasn't too healthy. And then Mitch White, honestly, kind of gets slept on as a possible starter. He was a starter swingman for the Dodgers, and I could see him being a big long relief guy for, let's say, Jose Barrios or Yusei Kikuchi isn't that effective. Mitch White comes in to clean up, a time or two through the lineup.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's definitely not the worst bullpen we've seen in the world or throughout this. It's definitely not the best either, though. They definitely have some arms that are going to come in, and give you different looks. I do agree. I wish there was more variety, in lefties to righties, but I think Tim Mays is going to do a very good job as a lefty. And hopefully they will bring in somebody else, to come in and help out that bullpen. Tom, what are you feeling on it?
I mean, I think last year I would have said the bullpen for the Blue Jays would probably be one of the weaker spots in this entire team. But in the offseason they addressed it, and I think now you can say, I mean, you don't need the best bullpen because you're not a team like the Rays that's not going to slug for that much. This team can hit. So realistically, you only need a couple guys to step up in this bullpen. You don't need this all-star bullpen like teams that don't hit as well, like the Rays need. So I think they're going to do their job. And I think there's a couple of guys in this bullpen that are actually going to be stars. I think Eric Swanson's going to have a breakout, as if he hasn't already, but I think he's going to take the next step as well.
Yeah, I kind of worry for Jordan Romano as a closer. He seems like a guy kind of like Edwin Diaz through like the late 2010s, where some seasons he was really effective and some seasons it just all went to crap just because of how hard he lets up contact. Everything else, like the ball itself, looks very good out of his hand. It's just he's got the psycho look of a closer, and probably makes you as scared as any other closer as well.
Yeah, I think he came off last season leading the league in saves. So I mean, that saves is like wins for pitchers. It's not that important, but he still does have that stuff. I'm confident in this bullpen. I'm confident. And I think once we go ahead and later in the episode and talk about the projections, I think that will kind of reflect how confident I am in this bullpen.
See,
Stedman walks through. Oh yeah, go ahead, Red.
I was gonna say I have a little bit more reservation just because, like, again, it's a lot of the same look. There's a little bit of variety, but I think just a lefty power arm like Ricky Tiedemann would be really helpful. I just don't know if he's expected for this year.
I mean, yeah, I mean, definitely having like a guy that I haven't seen a lefty throw that hard in a while, other than Chapman. He could be the guy to step up. I mean, even a guy that you can definitely slot him in this bullpen somewhere. I mean, he's projected to be a starter, correct?
As of now.
Yeah, so I mean, you could have him as a long relief guy in his rookie year, and then promote him to a starter later on if he shows some signs of life in the pros.
I mean, definitely if they are struggling in the bullpen department and they feel like he's performing at a high enough level in double triple A somewhere in that range, I definitely could see them pulling him up this year. But I think they might just not want to start his timer and they want to be a little more on the cautious side with him.
See, I'm going to disagree with you there because the Blue Jays window is only about a year or two left before it starts going downhill.
They got to start signing people.
Yeah, and if they're, in contention, but there's a couple issues here and there, I don't think they're going to hesitate to pull up Ricky Tiedemann if he is the guy that they need him to be. He's never pitched above Double A, but then again, he's likely to start the season in Triple A.
I mean, yeah, and he's got the stuff. He got the major league stuff. I mean, I'm not saying you can just throw him up there, but I think he's going to perform pretty well. I'm looking up his preseason stats. Has he been performing well in the preseason? I know I saw clips of him pitching.
I'm not sure. I was just looking at last year's stuff, and he performed really well across all three levels that he played.
Yeah, I mean the strikeout to innings pitch ratio is crazy. That's what you want a relief pitcher too. So I don't see why you don't give him the chance this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up before the All-Star break.
I would say about mid-season would be the earliest we'd see him. I don't think he's gonna make it out of camp.
Yeah, because he's been shut down for most of camp with a shoulder issue.
Yeah.
So
That's probably going to be the thing that'll hold him back from coming up at all, is going to be that injury.
agreed.
But let's walk through this lineup now. So you got George Springer leading off in right field, Bo Bichette at short, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first, Alejandro Kirk behind the dish, Dalton Varsho on left, Matt Chapman at third, Brandon Belt at DH, Whit Merrifield at second, and Kevin Kiermaier in center field. Your bench consists of Danny Jansen, Santiago Espino, Kevin Biggio, and Nathan Lukes. It's top to bottom. It's a great lineup. I don't think you can really argue about that. It brings you offense and it brings you defense. It plays well on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think the offensive aspect of this lineup is really good. I really worry about Bo Bichette's longevity at shortstop just because of how poor his defense is.
Sure.
And I wonder how much that's going to hurt this team. Obviously, they just constructed a really, really effective defensive outfield. And that's going to help a pitcher like Kevin Gossman, who last year had a bunch of bloop fly balls land. Brandon Belt at DH is really interesting. I could see him and Danny Jansen / Alejandro Kirk platooning. And it also provides a bench option. Santiago Espinal had a solid beginning of the season last year and kind of tailed off. And then Biggio and Lukes just never really have had it click in the major league level.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that Danny Jansen point. I think Danny Jansen's definitely got a better hit tool than Brandon Belt at this point in his career. I mean, I love Brandon Belt. He's a former Giant, obviously, but he's never really on the field. He hasn't been on the field for a whole season in probably 3 years. I don't see him surviving a whole season, even at a low, strenuous position like the DH position. I still don't see him making it through a whole season.
I agree with that. I think Danny Jansen has earned a spot to be an everyday type of player. It just sucks that he has to split time with Alejandro Kirk. And I think if he can't play catcher, he deserves to play DH. Brandon Belt is old, but you did go out. You signed him for what, 9 million? 9.3 million
Yeah.
over the next year. So he's going to get playing time. It's just a matter of how much. And I definitely think platooning, giving Alejandro Kirk days off behind the dish, having him DH, having Danny Jansen DH, having Brandon Belt DH, especially with how we don't really know how Alejandro Kirk's body type is going to hold up. Brandon Belt's body type is not holding up at his age, and Danny Jansen can do pretty much everything. So I definitely think it'd be smart of them to platoon those three guys.
Yeah, and Kirk's a much better defensive catcher. So maybe you look at him getting more closer to 100 games with Jansen getting the other 60.
Yeah.
And they also I think they have one more catching prospect, and obviously not Moreno, who's now a Diamondback, but I think they have one other guy that they can just call on if they need it. And also there's always veteran catchers that you can sign if you need. I like it. I like the offense. I think a lot of this ride or dies on the top three in that lineup, Bichette, Guerrero, and Springer. If they're healthy and good, the Blue Jays succeed. But if not,